Bill. Thank you very much, guys.
You're married now? Oh, wow. That was great fun yesterday. Thank you ever so much for inviting me. It was such an honour, and I'm very proud of you both, and it was a lovely day, and the most important thing was, of course, the food was great. Love hog roast. Good job. But, so it was Angie and Felix's wedding. Eventually got to it. It's been a hard slog getting there, and it's been, I think, going to be worth the wait. And so I'm talking about Mr. and Mrs. today, and it was just a coincidence. But it is going to be really simple, short message with just a few little scriptures, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that I've had very little prep time. In fact, I was finishing it last night at the wedding. They went off to do some extra photos. I was like, great, I can go and do something and not get caught, and they come in and caught me. So I prepped it during your wedding, which I think just adds to the flavour of it. But it got me thinking about all weddings. I've been to a lot of weddings. Like, I've got big families. Steph's had a big family, been involved in church for many years. I've been to a lot of weddings. And nearly all of the weddings, and it's just generalisation. I know people hate generalisations, but I'm going to say it anyway. Mostly the ladies are like, oh, doesn't she look cute and beautiful? Like, and I'm like, all the wedding dresses look the same to me. But like all the ladies, oh, doesn't she look great? And they maybe cry, and it sort of brings back a flutter of love if they're married to their own hubby and memory of the day, all that sort of stuff. And I'm really excited for them for the future. And the guys are like, well done, mate. Never thought you'd find anyone who's going to marry you. And that is the general tone of it. But it brings me to my first point, which I did share with them in the car on the way home, just so that I didn't offend them too much from the stage. And I think many people will agree with me, many blokes maybe, but this, and don't shout at me or anything, but thanks for inviting me, like I said. But I hate weddings. Yes, I've got someone else in the room. I know some people love them, they're the best thing since sliced bread, but I hate weddings. I hate weddings. I hate weddings. Have I made that clear? I need bigger writing on the screen. Can we zoom that in? I hate weddings. And I think I was reflecting on it in the car last night, and I don't think I would actually hate weddings. I think I hate the way we do weddings, because I hate shoes. My feet hurt today. Anyone else there? Some of the ladies are like, shut up. Yeah. My feet hurt because I've only worn these set of shoes twice, because I do weddings, funerals, and job interviews, and you know, most of the people I know are young, and I don't go on job interviews, so it's just weddings. And I bought one a few years ago, and they still hurt, is what I'm saying. But suits, I hate suits. Anyone who knows me, I'm a sweater. Thank you for the water. See, he knows I need hydration. That's good timing, Josh. And so I hate wearing a suit. I'm always uncomfortable in a suit. I don't like it. I don't care if it makes me look smart. I hate it because I sweat. I don't like sitting down for long periods of time. Anyone who knows me, I like to move constantly. So I hate being a guest at a wedding, which is why I loved just running around helping you organise the wedding yesterday, because I hate sitting down doing nothing. I hate waiting for things. Like, that's a lot of waiting at a wedding. I hate people taking my photo. So it's like this combination of all these things, this perfect storm of things that come together that make me want to hate. I hate being formal. I don't like formalities, as you can guess by the way I preach usually. And I don't like being quiet when I'm supposed to be. And so there's all this stuff that makes me hate weddings. And like, for me, the only ups really are the food. Love the food. And when I go to, honestly, when I think back of, like, I don't know, like 50 weddings I've been to in my life, the only thing I can remember is what was served. Like Josh, he's Josh at the back, he got me a bottle of water just a minute ago. I remember on his evening that he had the food in the thing, but in the evening, ribs that were like this big and chunky, and that's all I remember. Anytime I look at Josh, I just see big ribs. I remember couples by their food choices. And hog roast will be in there. That's all I'm going to log from the day. But, so that is the upshot of this. I remember my sister's wedding. It was brilliant because they were these lovely fancy canapes, and they were good. And you know, in British culture, it's sort of a bit rude to, you're allowed one off the thing. And so like, there's these waitresses like with hundreds of canapes, and they just kept coming to me because they knew I'd just take 3 or 4 at a time. And so that is the only upside for me about the wedding. But maybe I should open up the context a bit is because I hate weddings, but I love marriage. I hate weddings, but I love marriage. And not mine, although obviously I do love mine too, but what I mean is the institution of marriage. I hate weddings, but I love marriage. And I've put this in my notes. Why love it? Question mark. 'Cause, and then I highlighted my quote in an ink that I can't actually read now. But I think it's on the screen, and this is why. I think it's because marriage lets you annoy one special person for the rest of your life. That is the foundation of my belief in it. One special person to annoy, and Steph will tell you, out of all the people I annoy, and I am annoying, she is the person I concentrate most of my energy on. And so you get that one special person for life. But me and Steph have been married for 18 years. And so I was 21 when we got married, I think, and she was 20, so we were quite young. And what I loved was we actually went to the States to get married. She convinced me to get married in Disney World, in one of the hotels outside of Disney World. We weren't Mickey Moused up or anything, it was just the venue. But because we were in the States, she wasn't even allowed to drink like a toast at her own wedding, which I thought was funny, which is fine because she doesn't drink anyway. But I just found that quite funny. But when I think about how I proposed as well, it's quite funny. I remember we'd been dating a little while, and I took her to the Abbey Gardens in Norwich. Anyone been there? Like, if you're not around from the area, there's lovely, beautiful Abbey Gardens. Thought I'll take her somewhere nice, sort of picturesque, you know, at least something to add to the ambiance, and to hopefully make her say yes. But we got there, and it was just hammering it down with rain. I was like, oh, this is rubbish. And so we walked around, and then I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? I'm not a sort of nervousy guy, but I was like, oh, how am I going to do this now? Because it's wet, I don't want to kneel down. And then she said, can we sit on the bench? And I was like, yeah. So I sat down, but she was like, I don't want to sit on the bench, it's wet. So she sat then on me, on my lap, and we were just cuddling. And then I was like, right, I'll do it now. It's sort of a nice, quiet moment. And then I was like, the ring's in the pocket that she sat on. And I was like, so I was getting all sweaty and weird. And it's funny because I asked her to marry me. She said yes and blah, blah, blah. But she said to me, like, on the way home, she's like, I thought you were going to break up with me. Because I was being all weird and sweaty and like nervous and stuff. And so I proposed to Steph, but what is funny is that what's weird is that Steph at 16, she would have been when I met her, she told me she was going to marry me before we'd even been on a date. She's like, I'm going to marry you. And we hadn't gone out or done anything major like that. We're just getting to know each other, sort of friends. Sort of, we knew there was a spark there and something happening. And she was like, I'm going to marry you. And I was like, at the time, I'll explain later, but that was like, whoa, okay. But something that sort of seasoned it a bit is that she brought a sandwich with her. Trixie. So that is a good tester, ladies. You know, just if you're dating early on, just mention marriage. If they run away, then you know they're not the one for you. But if you really like them, bring a sandwich. Telling you, it'll work. But marriage was something that she was aiming for from an early age. It was something that she was taught and thought and could mimic and look at and had good examples of. Me, I didn't have that in my world, but it was something she was aiming for and was vocal about it and celebrated it and was excited about it. And why? Why was she? And I think it's because she knew that marriage is great. She knew that marriage is great, that marriage could be great, but that marriage in general is great. And I want to be really clear for any singles in here, if you're single for a long time on purpose or not on purpose, that's cool. You know, Jesus didn't get married. The Apostle Paul didn't get married. God used their life and had purpose for them in a different context that wasn't within the realm of marriage, and that's okay. And maybe you're called to be single, that's fine. There can be purpose in that. Paul even talked about that being a gift in some respect. And so I want you to be clear. I'm not saying if you're single, you should get married. That's not what I'm saying. It's a message about the value of marriage. And so hopefully we've got on board with the singles there, that you're not going to switch off, because this is just as much for you. Even if you know you'll never get married, the core of what I'm saying is still exactly the same to you, because what I want to do today really quickly is address the disdain found in our culture toward the importance of committed, monogamous relationships. People who push back and don't even like marriage. People who push back and don't even like monogamous relationships. And when we look at the stats, marriage is a historical low in the UK and the States as well, across Europe. I don't know about the rest of the world, but marriage is a low in terms of how many people are getting married. I think the peak in the UK is like 1972 or something. And now there's like a quarter of the amount of marriages per single people compared to then. And so there's this pushback culturally against marriage. In the 50s, the average age of someone getting married, a woman would have been 20, a guy would have been 22, 23, something like that. And in 2016, the last date was taken in the UK, the average age of a woman getting married is 35 and a half, and a bloke nearly 38. And so there's this 15 years difference just in just the last generation, really. A 15 years difference, and what I consider, and I'm not talking about your individual situation, I'm talking about collectively across a nation, that's like 15 years lost to me. It's 15 years lost of this great thing called marriage, because there's a culture war going on. And if you're not aware of this, then maybe you're not entwined in media and that sort of stuff. But there is a culture war attacking the biblical view of what marriage is and what even relationships should be, and even the importance of the nuclear family. There's a culture war attacking that. And even on monogamy itself. And there's more and more stuff coming out on social media about the benefits of not living that sort of lifestyle. And it's like, for me, when I examine it, it's like every other situation in popular culture, it's saying that every other situation should be celebrated, but the traditional sort of Judeo-Christian norms of marriage are the ones that need to be resisted. Like there's something wrong with them, they're bad, they're wrong, they're oppressive in some way. But I believe actually that the inverse is true, that other stuff is not good and can be quite harmful, and marriage is great. That's what I believe, that marriage is great. And I want to be really clear before I get deep into this, is that I'm not coming from an upbringing of conservative Christian values on sex. I'm not. That's not my upbringing. That's not where I came from. And there's nothing wrong if you've come from that and that's all you know and you've been trained in that way of thinking and you see the value of that. But that's not where my argument comes from. And it's not that there's no value in that argument. And that if that's you and that's what your view on the world and that's how you talk and push on people. But that's not where I've come from. I've come from the opposite end of the spectrum. And the opposite end of the experience spectrum as well. I was raised in an atheist home by a single mum. I was sexually active at 14. I'm the complete opposite end of what I'm talking about this morning. And so I didn't value marriage. My parents split up before I can even remember. I didn't value marriage. It's not something that was talked about and pushed and encouraged. Yet, even at 14, I very much understood the value and desire to be united with one person. I did. It was deep down inside of me. And I wanted to be in deep relationship with one person. It's like deep down, I knew it was something that was good. It was a good thing to go after. And so I go further than my last point of marriage is great. I've put this, that marriage is better than great. Marriage is good. And there's a difference. Marriage is great, yeah, but I want to go further. Marriage is good. It's good. In Proverbs 18:22, from the Message version, and some of you will push back against this one, it says this: find a good spouse, you find a good life, and even more, the favor of God. And some of you who know your Bible are like, hold on, that's the Message version. Find a good spouse. It says find a good wife. And I think they've taken the gender out of it to be more. But I think the inverse is true. If you find a good husband, you find a husband, it's a good thing too. But you find a wife, he who finds a wife finds a good thing. He who find a good spouse, I love it. You find a good life, it's a good thing. Marriage is a good thing. And it says, and even more, the favor of God. Not just it's a good thing, but you find the favor of God. And before I delve in any deeper, I also want to be really clear. I'm doing lots of caveats today to make sure I don't get chucked off YouTube. But I also want to be really clear that I'm not so much arguing for the current legal framework of marriage. I'm not talking about that, but the joining of a man and a woman in a loving, monogamous relationship. I'm going to get that word wrong many times today. To the exclusion of all other people with the possibility for children in the future. That's effectively what I'm talking about. The way Jesus reiterated it in Matthew 4-8, it says this, haven't you read the scriptures, Jesus replied. They record that from the beginning, not just this new invention that we think we just invented a few years ago, but from the beginning, God made them male and female. And he said, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united as one. It's this bringing together of two people into one. This joining up of two people into one. Since they are no longer two but one, it says this, let no one split apart what God has joined together. And what Jesus is doing here is painting this picture of an ideal. And because we're all fallen people, we're going to miss it so often. People are going to break up. Many of my relationships, even Christians that I've known, marriages are broken up. And that is painful and hurtful and it's difficult. But Jesus says, you know, he would say, don't let that taint your view of what the ideal is. The ideal is this, and we're aiming for it, and sure, many people will miss the mark. That's what even sin means, is missing the mark, is not going to aim and hitting what God says is the best for us. It says, since they are no longer two but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. And then in verse 7 it says this, then they replied, because they were trying to argue and trap Jesus, they said, then why did Moses say in the law that a man could give his wife a written notice of divorce and send her away? They were trying to trap him and say, yeah, but in the law, in the marriage laws, and our marriage laws have changed in that time, and there's different things that people might disagree with, agree with, but Jesus was saying, all right, in your law it says you can do that, but, he says, Jesus replied in verse 8, Moses permitted divorce within the law, within the framework of the law, as a concession to your hard hearts. But it was not what God had originally intended. Jesus was saying that the whole point of marriage was this, the original intention was joining a man and a woman together forever, and everyone else can do one. That's my words, I'm paraphrasing. Everyone else can do one, and you two become one. And sure, those things break apart and we're messy, but Jesus says that's not what the intention is. That's not what it's designed for. That's not the best. That's not the ideal. And some of us can get tied up in like the legal framework of where we live in different countries, different cultures of what marriage is. But originally, marriage is just really a man and a woman joining together by God. Joining them together by God. It says this, but it was not what God had originally intended, and let no one split apart what God has joined together. Not what two people have legally agreed contractually to share resources and possessions and families coming together and selling each other in different cultures. It's not that. It's saying that two people come together in agreement and God joins them together. So that's what marriage is, and we can get caught up in the legal context of where we live. But the first marriage license wasn't introduced until like the 1100s. Before that, like that blows some Christians' mind in here. It's like, well, how did they get married formally and legally? And it was just like people decided that we're getting married, and they decided we were going to make it public for accountability so everyone knows this is my partner. And that was marriage. There wasn't any, and that sounds great to me because I hate weddings. Just like you do it, and I'm not saying that I'm not pushing that is the way you should get married, or that's cool. We live within a framework now, and maybe it's best to live within that framework. But the church then, I think it was 1563, they then wrote the laws surrounding marriage into the canon. And so, but then over time, the governance of marriage was then sort of handed over from the church to the state. It was then, we don't want to do this anymore, you take over. Or maybe it was taken from the church to the state. And now the state and the governing bodies of any given country control what is marriage, how it works legally within that framework. And I don't want to get caught up in that conversation. It's boring to me. It's about the joining of a man and a woman together in this monogamous relationship, saying this is just us. And if children come from that, then cool. And if more children come than you thought were coming, then great. So I want to raise the odds again, and some of you might not like this, and maybe I wouldn't have liked this when I was 15 or 16, but I'm going to raise the odds that marriage isn't just good. I believe that marriage is good for everyone. And you're saying, but Phil, you just talked about the singles, and that's fine. No, marriage is good for everyone. And I want to say, if you are single or you've been broken up, you've been hurt in marriage, or your parents, you saw bad stuff and that's causes conflict in you. And I want to argue that marriage is good for everyone in a different way. And if you look at the biblical account of marriage, nearly all of it sucks. Nearly every biblical reference, there's like 2 or 3 of people's stories where it's like, that's like what God said it should be like. Every other story and situation, people messed up within it. People messed up within it, and there was carnage because of that. And so, what I'm getting at is, don't allow your bad experience to taint what is fundamentally good. Don't let your experience, because I had bad experience from marriage from an early age. Don't let that taint what is fundamentally good. Just because an individual marriage was poisonous does not mean that marriage is. Just because an individual marriage is poisonous doesn't mean that marriage is. If you drink stagnated water and you poison yourself with it and get sick and hurt, the answer to that is that nobody should drink water. Just because you drank poisonous water, it doesn't mean that water isn't good. And in fact, part of the solution from being sick from poison or stagnated water is what? Good, clean water. And my point is really that we shouldn't allow bad experience of marriage or bad examples of it to taint what we fundamentally know is a good thing. I think society generally, and I can understand why, I do understand why, has allowed bad examples of how not to do marriage, to argue against marriage. Look at all these bad examples of marriage, so let's not do it at all because there's bad things within it. It's so messy, so let's not do it. But I don't think that negates the fact that the ideal of marriage is a good thing, a God thing. And so I want to clarify my point here is marriage is good for everyone. Marriage is not for everyone, but marriage is good for everyone. Marriage is not for everyone, as in individually to enter into that agreement. But marriage collectively is good for everyone, in that it benefits all. Society's valuing it and cheering it on. It actually benefits everyone. And I believe marriage is the fabric on which our society is built. It's part of the weave, if you like. And the stats are in. And even if you don't like it, even if you still have this sort of resistance to it and hurt from it, like I might have done in my past, where that sort of, from my own feelings, the stats are in and you can't argue with facts. Well, you can actually, but you always lose. But the data's in. You know, marriage, if you look at every metric, marriage is good for men. And I'm not saying, again, not individual marriages. I'm talking marriage is good for men. It's good for women. It's good for kids. It's good for community. It's good for the economy. It's ridiculous. It's good for the stability of a nation in terms of war with other nations. It's good for levels of crime. It's just ridiculous. Marriage, monogamy, the nuclear family are the best predictors of success in life on all metrics. Every single way you can measure good and people being happy and people being... In fact, I've got some stats here as well. People who are married statistically are happier. And it's funny because culturally we sort of play it the other way around, don't we? That people who are married are like, oh, I'm married. But people who are married are happier. I think it's like a 9% increase, but check this out. The old people who are married are the happiest. When people are surveyed, and they've done vast amounts of surveying with this, people who are married are happier generally than people who are single or divorced or whatever, and people who are old and married, you know, been married a long time generally, are the happiest. And this leads me to my point, which is get married, get happy, stay married, stay happy. I don't know, some of you, if you have bad experience, will push back against this straight away. I'm talking about collectively. I'm talking about marriage in general, good marriage. If you get married, you get happy. Happy wife. Oh, my word. Get married, get happy. Stay married, stay happy. If you can pull it off. And it's hard. Marriage is hard. And I thought of this morning as I walked in. Marriage is hard work, but marriage works. Marriage is hard work, but marriage works. And so for me, the data's in. The maths has been run. Marriage is good for everyone. And it's almost like this traditional Judeo-Christian norm actually has utility in our lives and in our cultures. Like there's some reason that they became traditions in the first place. Some of you can sense my sarcastic tone. Because we have run the experiment for like 10,000 years. We've done the maths. The stats are in. Society actually settled a long time ago the argument that humans operate best socially in monogamous pairs. All the data is in on that. The institution of monogamous marriage being, for me, of being good is self-evident. It's the ideal. Sure, it's not for everyone, but it is good for everyone. It is good for society. It's good in general. And so, I put this, that God didn't invent marriage or set up the institution of marriage and bless it and the principle of monogamy as an arbitrary rule to follow. Because I think some culture can think that. Even Christians can think that. The Bible says this. Don't do this before marriage. Don't do that. It's like God's just gone, I'm going to make up some rules. This one, be married, stay with one person, don't cheat on them, don't do that. That's just, I've made it up. And it's like some people think it's just an arbitrary rule that we follow, but it's almost like the creator of the universe, the creator of you even, understood the benefits that it brings, understood the value, and knows that this thing called marriage works the best generally for humanity. And so Paul wrote in Hebrews, and I love the way the NIV puts it. He says this, marriage, check it, should be honored by all. Well, even if I'm never going to get married and I'm single and I've had bad experience with it, yeah, marriage should be honored by all. And the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. I couldn't just leave that bit out. But I want you to think about this, because there's this culture war going on against marriage, and if marriage at the moment, and you might not agree, but I believe it to be true, if marriage is the fabric of our society, if you tear that fabric up, what do you replace it with? And some of you might even have some ideas about that, but what do you replace it with? Do you really think what you replace it with will be better? Because some people do, and I think there's an arrogance in that. We've run this experiment for thousands and thousands of years and come up with this solution, and people think, well, I want to get rid of it because of my own personal experience. And what I come up with for society must be better. I think there's an arrogance to that. There's a pride to that. And as I finish, maybe I should clarify why I'm talking about this. It's not just because you got married yesterday. It's because of this assault on marriage, and because no longer is a good marriage promoted as an ideal to aim for between a man and a woman. It's no longer promoted, even in our schools. And if you look at the data and the way it's going, in 30 years, marriage will effectively be extinct. And things can change, and that's what I'm hoping to be a part of, is that we can change the tide and we can turn the tide. Because our children are growing up in a world where the concept of marriage is undervalued, at best, probably, or opposed directly, at worst. Our children, your children, if you haven't had children yet, if you're going to have children, but all the people who are in your world are growing up in this culture, this environment that's saying marriage sucks, don't do it. Marriage sucks, don't do it. Where I think we should raise our children to honor marriage, like Paul says. And I mean purposely raise children up. And raise if you don't have children, the people in your wider world and the way you talk about things, we should raise people up, encourage people to, but particularly with our kids, to honor marriage, to admire marriage. Just like Steph, it was something to aim for, it's something to chase, it was something good that she could have. To see it as an ideal and not an old-fashioned, out-of-date idea. It could be so easy for the church, particularly, just to be like, oh, okay, the times are changing. It's not like it used to be. Like it's just a fashion thing. Like tight, skinny jeans. Like these are skinny jeans. It took me like 7 years to come to terms, right, I'm going to have to start wearing skinny jeans, because I grew up in a time when jeans were big and baggy. And that was cool. The baggier, the better. And the further your bum hung out the back, the cooler you were. That's what it was. But this fashion changed to skinny jeans, and I just got on board, and now apparently it's going back. And so culture changes with this fashion thing, but they're trying to do it. The culture was trying to do it in marriage. Like this marriage thing is just it's an old-fashioned fashion thing. It's a fad. It's something we don't need. Skinny jeans, fat jeans, baggy jeans, jeggings. No, never. I don't even know what jeggings are. But the culture was trying to change this view of marriage that I just don't think is just not good for us. And so I'm saying we should raise our children to honor marriage, to admire marriage, to consider it an ideal, not just this old-fashioned, out-of-date idea. And why? Because it's probably the most the most likely way they're going to thrive in society. Because God set up this system to help people thrive. It's good for everyone. Even if they themselves never marry, marriage in general is good for them. It's good for everyone. And they should honor it and think of it as good, even if they never, ever touch it. Just like you can understand salad is good, even if you never eat it. And there might be some debate in the room whether salad is good. But this might be unpopular, but I don't care. I ask Ava all the time, because I do it with my kids. I say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And Joel wanted to be like a paleontologist and then a scientist. And Ava has never changed tack. She's only 6, but we've been asking her since she was 3. And I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, and she still says, when I marry Cole, who's this little boy at school, when I marry Cole, I want to be a mum. When I marry Cole, I want to be a mum. And can I tell you, 95% of parents and school teachers and the system would be like, no. Would be like, no, darling, all your priorities are wrong. You need to be looking at a career, you want to be searching, and these are your priorities. Here are the things we do. Here is your tick list to go through life. When you get to 36 and 37 and a half, then think about marriage. And most parents would push back against that and be like, and even like a little boy, you better come around here first. But Ava says, well, at 6 years old, when I'm older, Daddy, what I want to be is, not a job, what I want to be is I want to be married to Cole, I want to be a wife, and I want to have children. And most people would discourage that, but not me. I think it's cool. I do. I think it's great. And and I say to her, I've said this like 50 times, you'll be a great mum. You would be the best. She's so nurturing. She's got the natural sort of feminine nurturing tendencies in her to the extreme. I'm like, you're going to be a great mum. You might need to marry like a hardcore dad, though, to sort of bring a bit of balance in. But she's going to be amazing. And I'll be like, you'll be an awesome wife. Just make sure you get an awesome husband. And that doesn't mean you can't value a career and go on to be a dentist or a vet or a bin man, which you can't be a bin man. It doesn't mean you can't be any of them things. But she values right now this thing. And I know why she values it, because she sees mummy and daddy and says and knows and thinks that's good, even though we're doing it and we're messing it up all the time. That she sees something in it and says, that's valuable. I want that for my life. I know that it's good and it's good for everyone. It's this deep instinct in her to mimic a loving, meaningful relationship through marriage. And I think it's beautiful. I'm not going to squash that. In fact, I'm going to encourage it. And I'm not saying I'm going to push her down a road and get her to marry someone too young that she shouldn't be married. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the principle of valuing it and loving it and seeking it and searching it and knocking on that door, I'm going to promote and promote and promote. I want her to celebrate it. And like I said, not push them into marriage. And I actually asked them this morning. I said to Joel, just on the way out, because we were talking about this, I said, Joel, Ava, just a question, and you might not know an answer, you might not even know an opinion, but just I want to get what you think. What's the best age to get married? And Joel went, 21, and then walked off. And Ava sat there, 16. And I was like, whoa! I was like, I think legally it's 17 with parents' permission, 18 with that, but I was like, I haven't checked the rules. I need to check the rules. But I didn't actually react like that. Part of me was like, that's cool. Like you're like, it's so valuable. I want to get it as early as possible. And there's, you got to have some wisdom and discernment in that. But I like that heart. Them getting married young does not scare me. Like many parents would be like, no, don't do it because there's so many mistakes that could be made. I want to protect you from it. And yet you might have got married young and made all the mistakes and everything worked out fine. And we can't sort of shelter children from like the pain that marriage can cause because just because some marriages are painful. Them getting married young does not scare me at all. In fact, I'm like, hurry up, get out the house. And I love them being there, but there's so many of them. But me and Steph, we married young, like compared to the culture. We were more like a couple from the 50s. She was 20, I was 21. So we were young, but then I thought about our church. Like Jack and Lacey, married young. Glenn and Lizzie not so much, but Glenn, she's a little bit older than him. Glenn and Lizzie married young. Matt and Sally married young. I remember when Matt and Sally told me they were getting married. I was like, what? And in fact, Steph went, are you pregnant? Honestly. Because this young marriage thing is like culturally, it's like, no, don't do it. Danger, danger. And even us who got married young were like, are you sure? You don't only known each other a little time? You know, it wasn't that short a time at all. But I love it. Now I look back, I think it's great. And I think of Josh and Lucy as well. And Julie and Isaac, I think, are relatively young as well. And then I pinged Dave and Sue. You had your anniversary the other week, didn't you? How many years? 45 years. 45 years. 45 years. 40, you're so old, don't you? 45 years. And you got married, I didn't even write it down, you texted me, didn't you? Was it 19 and... 18. You got it wrong, Dave. I think you sent me 19. Oh, classic. 18 and 23. Relatively young. And I think good for you. And good for you, but good for me. And I mean that. That is good for you, but that is good for me. What an example for me and Steph. You know, I say it almost boastfully. We've been married 18 years, then 45, I can't catch up with that, can I? We're years. But good for you and good for me and good for everybody. You're an example within the church for the youngsters and everybody else to see, even if they never enter into marriage, that they can see that and see that it is a good thing and it's good for everyone. And yet in our culture, they're told, wait, sleep around. Like, I couldn't imagine that. Just when I was a kid, it was like, if you were into all that sort of business, you know, and the sexually active of that age, it was like, hide it. Don't let anybody know. No, and now in our culture, it's like, yeah, go, experience it. That's how you'll make your way in life and find the right person. And I think that's the opposite of truth. In our culture, they're told to wait, sleep around with as many people as possible before you settle down. But I say for us as a church, and even if you're not a Christian, to acknowledge the goodness of marriage and how marriage is good for everyone and say, be brave and push back against that. And don't be bullied into a corner to accept this sort of bad behavior. It's not because it's written in the Bible, all these things, and we're prudes and stuff. It's that the alternative is better and good and great and should be honored and valued and chased after. It's an ideal that we're trying to have. Not because of religious laws, but because marriage is good. And marriage is good for everyone. So I finished in the words of Paul that we should all honor marriage. And I want to be clear, you can love people who have different views about marriage and lifestyles. You can even accept that they have the right to do what they like and think what they like. That's cool. But don't allow that to erode what you know to be valuable. You know, in this Mr. and Mrs. way of me putting it, Mr. and Mrs. is valuable. Mr. and Mrs. is good. It's good for everyone. And Mr. and Mrs. should be honored. Because for me, marriage is great. Amen? Let's pray.